of all, it's a beautiful song. I was really loving it until it talked about them leaving. It's a discussion my wife and I have had several times for some reason over the past couple of weeks, talking about our job as parents to raise our children to leave us and to be able to be successful, to be assets to not only our family, but the communities and the world and God. No, it was a beautiful song. I really appreciated that. I also did have one more announcement from Gary Nylander. He would like to thank the entire congregation for the feast basket that he received, as well as the many cards that he received during the feast. He said they were so encouraging and uplifting to him. He's been struggling as well, so I didn't want to miss that one. So today we're getting back into it's been kind of a series, but they're kind of separate in themselves. If you remember, I'll quickly recap. We went through Daniel 2, talking about the 4 different kingdoms, the 4 empires, the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about, and we tied that into Daniel 7. We did a whole sermon on Daniel 7, walking through that, how those empires are described slightly different than in Daniel, but they apply to the same one. And we've been building this all the way up till we get to this point of the title for today is Have You Seen the Beast? I told you we'll be getting into the mark of the beast, but more importantly, this question is a lot more applicable than what is the mark of the beast? Because if we don't know what the beast is, there's no way for us to take the mark. There's no way for us to get the mark. And so that's why I titled it, Have You Seen the Beast? With all the events that we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, we've had 2 to 3 years. COVID, we've had the Ukraine-Russian war, there's Ethiopian civil war, there's been murder in Burma, genocide in Burma, we have supply chain issues, now we're watching skyrocketing inflation, we're seeing shortages. We walk into stores and you don't know if the shelves are going to be half empty or completely empty. All the way to the point of baby formula. We never thought we would see a shortage of baby formula. With the blessing of little children, that has even a bigger impact because we see these babies that are absolutely dependent on this sometimes who need this, and we don't have it. And so we've seen this fundamental shift in everything we're dealing with in the world, everything we're dealing with locally, and it's putting some different dynamics on what we're dealing with and how we handle some of these things. Not only just physically, but mentally and emotionally. It can be nerve-wracking at times because things look like they are never going back to the way they were. And that's unsettling. What was normal before, what was our pattern, what we were used to, it may never be that way again. We may actually have some permanent changes, and this may be our new normal. Time will tell. But as things go on, and we start to try to look at some of this from a biblical standpoint, from a prophetical point, we start to try to tie some of this in and look at this, specifically the mark of the beast. Anytime big worldwide events happen, we're very quick to try to jump on and start tagging prophecy to this. We have to be really careful at times, though, because we don't always know exactly how God is working it. And so, like I said, oftentimes when we have chaos like this, a lot of the questions that come up is the mark of the beast in play now? Is it something that we can receive right now? The internet's filled with ideas, all sorts of things that people think is the mark of the beast. Pre-internet, pre-computers, there were ideas and thoughts of what that was. This is something that's been around a whole lot longer than just our generation, but that people try to get into. This goes all the way back to Social Security numbers. There was a point where people thought that your Social Security number was that mark of the beast, and there were people that refused to get a Social Security card because they thought that was the stamp, that was the imprint. We have microchips. Every single one of us are carrying around credit cards now that have a little built-in microchip. Tattoo barcodes, yeah, that's one of the funny pictures. The tattoo barcodes. We have nanotechnology that we know is microscopic, that could be something like this that people get into. And more recently, we've dealt with masks. We've dealt with the COVID vaccine itself. So we have all of these ideas throughout the years of what this could be. And honestly, technological advances aren't helping us any. It's not doing us any more good. It's only opening up more and more avenues where we go, oh, this could be it. This could be what sets us apart. And at the apex of COVID, they opened up that door of vaccine passports. All right, you had to get the COVID vaccine in order to get back to normal. That was what some states were pushing, that if you want to go to restaurants, if you want to go to a movie theater, taking cruises, traveling abroad, you had to get a vaccine and you had to get this passport that they could stamp and say, yep, I've been vaccinated, I'm okay. And so we have all of these things that unfold. And as this developed and as we watched it, thankfully we can look back at some of it and say, yep, that wasn't so helpful. And some of it, yep, that probably was helpful. But it didn't settle everything down. We're still in the midst of some of that chaos as we go through this. And anytime there's room to make money, companies are going to make money. They're going to jump on that bandwagon. And so while this COVID vaccine came up, there was actually a Swedish company that popped up with a scannable digital implant. And this is that would actually carry your vaccine passport. So this would no longer be a physical thing. It's about the size of a grain of rice. And what they do is they implant it between the forefinger and your thumb, the meaty part. And they can stick that inside the skin. That would carry around your information. All you have to do is scan it like you would to get your groceries when you put your credit card chip up there. That's the same thing. And so this started getting some traction. All of these things happen. The thing is, though, this Swedish company, this wasn't the first time they started using it. They've actually been doing this for years, a number of years. They implant them. And what they do is they use that implant to open doors. They use it to buy smoothies. They use it to unlock their printers. If you've ever worked for a company, you have to type in a code usually to get their printer to work because they don't want everybody using their ink and their paper. So this would unlock their printers so that they actually use them. And so it's nothing new for this company. It was just a way that they could start making money off of it by saying, hey, we can actually put your vaccine passport on this as well. Is that the mark of the beast? That's what we get into. We get into these ideologies and we get into these thoughts of saying, oh, that's it. We got to stay away from that. That's evil. That's of the devil. But we have to be really careful when we start making these claims. We have to be really careful with how we handle ourselves and how we start to speculate on what some of this stuff is or how it correlates with God's plan, because sometimes we start trying to jump ahead of God's plan. And we start trying to pinpoint that, oh, this is this is this. The whole point of prophecy, if you remember, when I've told you that prophecy is designed for us to go, God's plan is still in motion. God is telling us truth. God is still in control. It's not so that we can be ahead of the game. And sometimes we can use it for that because we can see things unraveling. But anytime we start trying to definitively pinpoint and say this is something, we have to be really careful. We have to be really carefully because, especially with the mark of the beast, because this is not something that we can inadvertently take. It's not something that we can do by accident. It's not something that can surprise us 20 years from now that we all of a sudden have the mark of the beast because of a decision that we made 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I'll be straight up front with you. The mark of the beast is not the COVID-19 vaccine. As much as we've heard that over the last couple of years, I guarantee you that is not it. You can take it, and you will not burn in the lake of fire because that is the mark. That is not what God does. God doesn't surprise us and say, oh, you got tricked. Everything God does is methodical, it's purposeful, and this is going to be a decision that we have to make and say, I'm willing to worship you over God. That's what it is. There's some type of idol involved with this beast worship that puts us into this category where we say, we are no longer tied to you, God, but this is what we're doing. And that's what we deal with. When we talk about how God is unraveling all of this, with everything that's happened, this has only been exacerbated. The whole theories and ideologies of what is going on and how this is playing out, because we've watched our society fundamentally be disrupted. We're still actively watching the world be fundamentally disrupted. by everything that's taking place. We're watching relationships change, individual to individual, nation to nation. All of it is different. And it's scary times, especially for those who didn't live through 1962. Because on top of all of this stuff, this is the first time any of us since 1962 have experienced anything remotely close to nuclear war. This is a first. The thought and the idea. I told Fort Wayne this last time. I didn't write in my notes, but I'll tell you too. This is my personal view that I thought there was zero chance, there was no way that we would ever go back to a military battle that went back to boots on the ground, that were men marching against men. With all the technological advances, it makes sense that people are sending missiles and drones, and that's what the war would be. And so when Ukraine and Russia, we're talking about tanks and men standing face to face, shooting each other, and then we have nuclear war on top of that, it's frightening. It's terrifying. All of this is unraveling so quick, and we start to see some of this, and one of the places that we go is we start to try to align this with prophecy, biblical prophecy, and we start going, oh, I see the king of the north forming. This is how we're going to see. I see the 10 kings. We start trying to align some of these things, but we have to really break this down and ask ourselves, is this really the beginning? Is it the beginning? And don't panic, because we're not. We're not quite there yet. We're not in that situation. As bad as this war has been, as bad as COVID has been, as bad as the economy is getting right now, this is not the beginning of the tribulation. We are not in it. We must keep a level head and keep doing what really matters. Building a stronger relationship with God, building a stronger relationship, and striving for the kingdom of God. That is our goal. That is our mission. That's what God has given to us, not only as individuals, but as a church as a whole. And that's where we're going. And thankfully, we have been given a privilege. God has kind of given us the inside scoop. He's laid some of these things out for us so we can understand them, not so that we can be ahead of everybody else, but so that when it does unfold, we can go, now I see what you're doing. Now I see what you're doing. And we don't guesstimate. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not guesstimating, and that's my guess and estimate. I like to make words up. We don't start tagging things that are what we think God is doing. Now, we can get our own individual ideas. We all have our little pet things that we think in our minds, but we have to be really careful about how we talk about that and how we share that and how we spread that, because God is the one that has the plan. God is the one that is working all of this out. I have never had any special visions. I've never had any special prophecies that give us any more information than what you can read in the Bible. I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm just not that important. I'm not that important. What God is doing, what he has provided with us, is an outline and a guide to how to live Christian lives. It's how to live a Christian life. And our job is to do the best that we can to replicate the life of Jesus Christ. And that's what we're doing. But we do need to make sure that we understand this stuff. We do need to make sure that we read it. It is in the Bible. It's part of the complete Bible that we have. And so there's an importance to that. There's a reason that he gave it. In order to understand all of this, I told you we're working our way to Revelation. We started out Daniel 2, Daniel 7. And I said we'll get into Revelation. So today we're going to get into Revelation. However, I want you to start out in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now, you may think this is kind of an odd spot to be, because when we think about this, the beast is never mentioned here over in 2 Thessalonians. But there's a significant part of this that applies to everything we've been talking about and the rest of what we're going to talk about today. And Paul actually mentions in here, he kind of alludes that there's more information that he's dealing with than what he gives us here. And it would have been great, because he actually says, I told you this in the past, and we'll read through it here in a minute, but it would have been nice if we had all of the details that he's dealing with, all of the information that he gave them. But what we know is that he's just filling them in. He's basically recapping for them, saying, hey, I already gave you all of this information. Don't get tripped up. And so he's reminding them of these things. And this is where we're going to start here in 2 Thessalonians. This is verses 1 and 2. It says, now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. So there was some teaching in Thessalonica where they believed that Jesus Christ had already come. That his return had happened, and that they were already working through that. The day of the Lord had already happened. And so Paul's telling them here, he's going, listen, stick to the truth, what we've already told you, remember what we've said. This hasn't happened yet. These things are going to have to take place. He goes, whatever clever arguments come up, he goes, stick to the truth. Even today, we deal with this to some degree. There's a belief out there that when the Holy Spirit came on that day of Pentecost, that was that return. That was the return that they were waiting for. It's still an idea that floats around today. But we know that that's different than what we find in the rest of the Bible with the return of Jesus Christ, and how that happens on the seventh trumpet. We just came through the fall holy days where we hit that hard. Look at verse 3. It says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So this part is actually pretty critical. This is important for what we're dealing with, because now we have a human being who comes on the scene and sits in the temple of God as if he is God. Not that he's representing God, not that he's leading to people to God, but he sits himself above God, as God. We aren't given the specifics. It doesn't iron everything out for us. But we know there's some type of rebuilding, reestablishment of the temple, and this person, this son of perdition, is in that role. He's going to sit claiming that he is divine, claiming that he is God. This really seems kind of odd for us. It's not something that we see people claim to be all the time. We don't see them saying, oh, I'm a deity. I speak for God. This isn't something we deal with on a regular basis. But this was normal for the Roman Empire. It's thought that leading all the way back to Rome's first king, King Romulus, that they set themselves as gods, that they were deified. And so that now was hundreds of years before the Roman Empire even existed. Several hundred years before the Roman Empire was established, this king kind of set this up. And we watch this trickle down. And when we get into the New Testament, we still see that that's something they're dealing with, that these Caesars were expected to be worshipped. Now, with the Roman Empire, they didn't care if you worshiped them and 20 other gods. You just had to show them some respect. When you go and pray to your God, you were also supposed to pray for them, because to them, give sacrifice to them, because they were a god as well. And that's where the early Christians ran into a lot of problems, because they weren't willing to pray to Caesar. They knew that was wrong based on God's standards, and they refused to do that. And that's why the Romans and the Christians had such an issue, because they refused to worship these Caesars as a god. And so it makes sense of why this fits with them, why they're dealing with this still at that point in time, because it was normal. That was normal life for them. If you look at verse 5, this is where Paul says, he says, do you not remember that when I was with you, I told you these things? So this is what it would have been really nice if he gave us all of those details. It would have been helpful for us to understand exactly what they were going through if he wasn't just filling in pieces here and he gave us the whole story. But in verse 6, it says, and now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. Now we have a time frame. Now we have a time frame. We know that this human being is going to sit in the temple of God as a deity, as a God. And when does it end? It ends at Christ's return. He is destroyed by Jesus Christ. So whatever this rebuilt temple is, like I said, it could be a little shack or a tent. We don't know. We don't know what this is. But wherever they're doing these sacrifices and where this is established, this person sits in that. And he has some sort of power. He has some sort of abilities. And he claims to have divinity, to be God. And so what we know from this is this person didn't appear 1,000 years ago. He didn't even appear 100 years ago. We're still waiting on this man because he has to be destroyed when Jesus Christ returns. This is another step in God's plan that hasn't happened yet, that we are looking for as a marker, that we're looking to try to figure out where we are on God's timeline. If you look at verse 9 says, "The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all powers, signs, and lying wonders." So this gives us a little bit of information of why he's able to sway so many people, why so many people are going to get on board with this, because this isn't just a human being acting. This isn't just us doing something or some individual doing something. He's being backed by Satan. He has been given some spiritual power. He's able to do something that no other human is able to do. He's actually doing miracles. And so when we think about a whole group of human beings going, this guy's a god, it makes sense because it says he's doing powers and signs and lying wonders. This is Satan being directly involved in this. He's giving him control and some power. This isn't just some magic trick that gets explained where you see the behind-the-scenes footage of how they do a magic trick. This is legitimate spiritual power that doesn't make sense on a human level, that shouldn't be physically done. This is something greater than that. It's all based around Satan being involved, this satanic power. And look at verse 10. It says, "With all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." Now, this is important. This section right here is really important because it talks about, we know many are going to be deceived. It's the same thing that's happening today with people being blinded, and it's God who has to open their eyes. But from this, we see that there's some people who aren't deceived. There are some people here that it's some self-willed rejection of God. They decide to give up the truth. And it makes sense when we just read a little while ago, it talked about the falling away has to happen first. There's a falling away that people who know the truth, who understand the truth and the plan of God, that they're going to choose a different path. They know this is wrong and they still end up going along with it. And God says he's going to send them strong delusion. Because of the choices that they've made, because of their rejection of God, he says that he's going to send them strong delusion. He's basically telling them, if you aren't going to believe my truth, you don't get any piece of it. You don't get any of my truth. And that's a scary spot for any of us to find ourselves in. We don't want to find ourselves in that. Because God's telling them, I'm not going to give you any help. Everything about our life, the blessing that we had today, asking for him as a small child to be with us, to bless us, to care for us, to put his angels around us, guide us through this whole thing. We have to stick with it. Wherever we go, we have to be solidified that we're going to stick to God's truth, and we're not going to give it up for anything. No matter what human, whatever they're capable of doing with Satan's influence, we know how the plan of God plays out. We know that Jesus Christ, I always joke with people that you can tell me anything you want, but I know that as soon as Jesus Christ returns in the air, that's the only person that's Jesus Christ. There's no confusion of that in the air. He's the only one that's Christ. It doesn't matter whether he's dead and resurrects himself. We know it's Christ who comes back in the air, and we're immediately changed. We see the resurrection taking place. And so it's not going to be a confusing thing for people who know the truth. But we know there's a lot of other things happening. There's got to be a reason why these people give up what they have, and we don't even know the tip of the iceberg right now. We don't know the dangers that we'll be placed in. We don't know the turmoil that we'll deal with, the struggles that we'll have to go through. But we know that we have to have a strong relationship with God. One of us, without God's help, we live in a delusionary world. We do. We live in a delusional world without God's help. Most of the world, most of humanity has never understood what God is actually doing. They don't understand the purpose of their life. It's a great purpose. I wish all of humanity understood that they are designed to be children of God. It's such a hopeful thing. It's extremely disheartening to see some people who lose loved ones or lose friends, and they think there's nothing else. That's sad and that's depressing. If we think this life, because many people live a couple hours, die in their teens, 20s, 30s. Some people don't have much of a life. But when we see God's plan, we understand that there's a whole lot more than just a physical life, and that God's going to give everybody an opportunity. God is going to give everybody an opportunity to build a relationship with him, to have a loving brother of Jesus Christ who sacrificed himself, and understand what that sacrifice actually means. We have to hang on to this relationship that we have with God. Because whatever starts to unfold, everything that we're going to see eventually take place, or I think it's going to happen in our lifetime, don't know it for sure, we're going to see Satan manipulating. More than just blinding people to the truth. He's going to be manipulating people. He's going to be looked. His desire is to be worshipped. It's the same thing that he did with Christ when he took him up on the mountain. He said, all you have to do is worship me. That's what his desire is. He wants to be worshipped. He thinks he is level and even to God. And he's going to do everything that he can to get into that position. And so we have this person, we have this man of sin who becomes center stage, who becomes the pinnacle attraction. All news media outlets, I'm sure, are going to be talking about him every single day because of the power that he has and what he's able to do. He has the world's attention, and people are going to be flocking to him. But we know that gets destroyed when Jesus Christ returns. Whatever he's capable of doing, that stops at that point. And he's not going to do this all by himself. We know that there's this political system that he has developed, whether it's trying to fix the economical side, but on top of that, we know there's going to be a military power that is also backing this. He has his hands in this military side of these things, a power that we've never seen, a military existence that we've never seen before, that's able to control aspects that we probably don't even know are in play right now. And so we see all of this kind of lining out right now. And it could change course again. It could work itself back out, and we could exist another 100 years. I don't know. But all I know is that we need to stay on our toes to have a strong relationship with God. And as things fall into place and actually occur, we'll be able to identify them. And there's some solid examples and specific things that we're looking for of how this is going to play out. You are so closely knit, we see how quickly it can develop. We are in line. Lizzie and I were listening to something the other day talking about the backpacks being built. There was this backpack that was being built, but before it got shipped to the United States to be sold, it actually went to 4 or 5 other, was it 5 other countries? 10. It went to 10 locations for a backpack. It was sent to 10 different locations before it ended up in the store. It's all based around economics, right? Being able to, if you can do it the cheapest and produce it the fastest, the most cost-effective way, so that they can make the most money. We are so intertwined with the rest of the world that we really had no idea of how quickly we were all going to fall together, the impact that we were going to have together, that we would still be dealing with supply chain issues today, wondering if the grocery store is going to have all the vegetables this time or next time. These are things we didn't realize we were going to face. But to be realistic, when we think about this impact, it's still actively going. The chances of Russia stopping this war before they get what they want, it's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely that they're not just going to end up going, nah, you put up a good fight, we'll stick with what we have, we're done. They're going to fight until they take what they want and they get what they want. I don't know if you knew, but Ukraine actually is a world producer of things like corn, wheat, and potatoes. They have a huge impact on the staples that many of us rely on, that the world relies on. And so even at this point, we know that there have been things that are happening where they haven't planted their crops. Some of their crops are going to be destroyed. So there's no going back already. We already know there's been some impact to some degree that things aren't being produced like they were last year. So if Russia does end up taking all control of what they want, where are all of those things going to? You think he's going to feed the world? No. It's going to Russia. It's going to Russia. He only cares about Russia. He doesn't care about anybody else. Now, say Ukraine does continue to hold out. They're able to plant to some degree. They're able to produce some of the vegetables and crops that they have. Who's going to get that food? Is it going to go to the back country of Africa where people are already starving? Nope. It's going to go to the countries that provided them planes and tanks, missiles. Right? They're going to scratch the back that scratched them, the ones that are helping them. We're going to see starvation and food scarcity like we've never seen next year. I don't know whether it'll hit next year. I don't know if it'll hit the year after that. But we know it's changed. We know it's been completely disrupted to some degree. We won't know how bad until we actually get there. But I know it's going to be worse. These are just the things that we know about. There's a ton of just economic things going on. There's environmental things that are going on, whether earthquakes or tsunamis or fires. I know the droughts have a big impact on it right now too. But this is what we're going through. This is what we're dealing with. Everything that we have, no matter whether it's in one little area of the world, it has a worldwide scale that it impacts now. We are all intertwined and tied together. We're much closer knit than we've ever been in the past. So every little tiny sub-crisis tends to develop into a major crisis now. It's something that we all have to deal with, a world crisis. We're not just dealing with small town things anymore. We're dealing with things that affect the world, all of human life, all of human existence. It's interesting as things have played out, of watching what Europe is doing, watching how they're getting involved or not being involved. It's a little bit unbelievable because Germany has done everything they possibly can for the past 70 years to keep their head down and not get any notice. They're just trying to rebuild, re-solidify their country. And they've said, we're not doing anything. Don't look at us. Don't talk to us. We're minding our own business. Now they're starting to understand that they may not have that opportunity. They may have to get involved because now they are being impacted. And so we're watching some of this unfold or watching some of this develop because we are intertwined like we've never been before. We as God's people are never in a spot where we put our heads down. We don't ever hide away. We don't ever try to mask what we're doing. We build our relationship with God. We don't let anything stop that. That's why we just all got back from the Feast of Tabernacles. It's why we sit there together saying, we are God's people. We want to have this relationship with God. He commands us to be here. He has set this apart. We were talking with the kids just the other night. We were starting that Bible reading program, and we went through the section where it talks about he was setting things apart, and it was his appointed time, right? God set appointed times. And we went through the section where it talks about he gave the time so that we could see the times and seasons and how we followed this times and seasons. It's all based around so we know when his appointed times are. He gave us specific points. I'm getting way off track here. But this is what we're doing. This is why it's so important that we stay aware. It's not to pinpoint things. It's not to make claims of, don't go get this because this is the mark of the beast. It's so we can watch things play out as God sees fit and has them done. When this man of sin comes on the scene, we're going to realize who he is. We're going to recognize who he is because of the power that he holds and what he's able to do. And we're going to have to be able to go back to Scripture and say, I remember this. I remember what God told me about this. So now go over to Revelation 13. I told you we get into Revelation. Revelation chapter 13. And remember, we went through 2 Thessalonians where Paul was writing that. That stuff wasn't written yet. When Paul wrote that, Revelation here wasn't written at that point in time. And so we're not sure exactly what all Paul knew or what all he told the people, because we know that there were some things that were left out that he didn't give us insight to. He didn't give all the details of what he had initially told them. So he may have known some of this, but just didn't write it down for us. We know there's specific points in time where God told people, hey, don't write this down. We saw it in Daniel. We see it in Revelation where he goes, don't write this. I don't want them to know this. So we know that God has something set aside that he's doing at times where he goes, this isn't going to benefit them. This isn't going to benefit them. And that's why when we go through this stuff, when we talk about the mark of the beast and trying to figure out who the man of sin is and who this political system is, and we don't try to associate things to that. We wait. We be patient. We develop our relationship with God. And then when it happens, we know it. It's when it happens that we know it. Looking at verse 1 of Revelation 13, he says, Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns were 10 crowns, on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. The dragon, so if you remember, dragon is a symbol for Satan. It says, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So this is that indication of this miraculous event that takes place that helps him to solidify himself as God, that he has power that's outside of normal. So it helps us to understand. It makes sense now. We're going, okay, he's doing something beyond physical. I see why people are getting attached to this. In verse 4, it says, So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So these people who are attaching themselves to this man of sin, they're inadvertently worshiping Satan. They don't realize it. They don't realize that he's being backed by an evil power, the satanic power. They're not worshiping Satan directly, but they're worshiping who Satan is using. And for us, we'll be able to determine that. We'll know who this person is. We'll know that this is not a godly person, and that we won't take whatever it is that aligns us with them. We have no idea what it is. I don't even speculate. By the time we get to that point, we have no idea what it's going to look like that they use to say, you're part of my group. You're part of my people. You have my sign. We don't know what that is, but we know that they are directly worshiping Satan. We know that. They just don't. They see this political power, this political man, this military power that they've never seen before, that it says, who is able to make war with him? They have power that's going, nobody can touch this. Nobody's able to defeat this. It's a massive military power. It's a political system. All across the earth, they're going, we can't defeat this. This is unbeatable. So we see this impact on a world scale. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to fight the entire world. It doesn't mean that he's going to actually try to control every piece of the world. But he's going to have a significant amount of power wherever he is, that he has some control. He's able to make decisions and do basically what he wants. If you look at verse 5, it says, and he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. So he's speaking against the true God, speaking against truth. It says, and he was given authority to continue 42 months. 42 months. We get that time frame again. We know that this is lasting a specific period of time. And for us, that's not that long of a period of time. That's less than a presidential term. 3.5 years. It's not a massive amount of time. Now, building up to this, we don't know what's in play now that's leading us up to this person being able to be in control. But once he's in control, it's a pretty short-lived period of time. Now, depending how bad it is, 3.5 years could feel really long. But in large scale, it's not a lot of time. And verse 6 says, and then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. This beast is going to represent the most powerful political and military system the world has ever seen. The influences, Satan's behind this power, they're being worshipped, they're blaspheming God. This is just pure chaos for Christianity. Anybody who's trying to live God's way of life and have a relationship with God, this is pure turmoil. They set the rules. They're going to be able to set the rules basically for the world, it seems like. Now, to what degree, we don't know. But we see that this man of sin is involved. There's a political system. So here in Revelation, it looks like a system, a government, some type of power, where 2 Thessalonians talked about it was referring to an individual. So we see these coinciding, these correlating. These two are one, basically. It's together. Whatever this relationship is, we see that they have power and control. So we start to see this connection with Daniel as well. This is where we can get back into Daniel. I don't want to spend a ton of time there, but it's been a couple weeks since we've looked at that. I do want to go to Daniel chapter 7 for a minute, just to remind everybody what we're looking at, what we're dealing with. So hold your finger here. Don't turn too quick, or put your ribbon here, because we're going to come back to this here in Revelation. But I want you to go over to Daniel 7 real quick and look at this. Because if you remember, Daniel talked about this fourth empire being destroyed at the return of Jesus Christ. This is going to be something, just quickly, if you remember, all of the empires were building on each other. You know, Daniel lived through Babylon and Persia. He was actually there for those. Then we get into Greece. They continue to keep building on one another. It's this continuation all the way until we get to the Roman Empire that we're going to see pop up again, that fourth power. Look at, let's see. So this is Daniel 7. If you drop all the way down to verse 23. It says, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth. Now, that's exactly what we see the beast in Revelation 13 doing. So he says, and he shall devour the whole earth, devour the whole earth, trample it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after it, and shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue three kings. So there's somebody else outside of these kings. Somebody else pops up. In verse 25, it says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a times. So we have this fourth kingdom, this fourth beast that's going to also be destroyed at the return of the Messiah. When Jesus Christ returns, that's when this takes place. So we can start fitting all of this into the same template. we start piecing this all back together and saying, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, 2 Thessalonians 2. These are all talking about that same time frame, these same events that are going to be taking place. Because it gives us that they're all destroyed at the return of Jesus Christ. So that's our template. That's why I started with Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, is because that's the template that we're given to be able to track this and follow this. Otherwise, we're somewhat lost of how all of this pieces together. But these verses correspond with what we've been looking at in this persecution of the saints, this persecution that's going to be taking place. That 3.5-year time period, it's one of the things that most scholars, you're talking the majority of scholars, all agree that times and half a time is revolving around that 3.5 time period. There's very little objection to that, and so we're fairly confident that that's why we stand our ground and say that 42 months, that 3.5 time period, whichever one they're using, it's interchangeable. It's the same time frame of what we're getting into. And everything that we see, everything that we go through, every time that we see our world flipped upside down and go through a crisis, our lives are becoming affected now. It's important that we understand what we've gone through already, but also to some degree understand what we're going to be facing, the changes that are going to happen, the things that are going to unfold, without automatically defaulting into saying, we're right at the end time. We're in the end time. This is the tribulation. Because what we're going to end up going through is we're going to see how this isn't. We're going to see how God lays it out as far as the time frame, that we're still working up to that point. We're still working up to that point. Because if we're in the tribulation right now, this is a cakewalk. This is a cakewalk. Compared to what we see is going to happen, this is much better than I ever expected it to be. This is pretty easy. But we know it's not going to be easy. And as we draw closer to the end, as we start to see things line up to establish this period of just pure chaos and turmoil. From our standpoint, the world's going to see some normalcy because that political power is going to create some sort of peace, some sort of economic wealth. Even though there's wars, it seems like they're the dominating force that brings order to the chaos. We know that it's pure chaos. We know that it's not godly. Head back over to Revelation 13 now, because I just wanted to quickly read through that section in Daniel, just to remind everybody about the where Daniel 7, it talks about the lion with eagle's wings, the bear, the leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. And then we get the 4th one where Daniel just describes it as utterly terrible and destructious. That's a terrible word. Destruction. Teeth of iron. We find it here in Revelation 13, verse 2. It was exactly what we just read a minute ago. It says, "Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion." It's all correlating. It's all coming together. He gives us this full picture so that we understand how all of this is intertwined and how it fits. That 4th one, he's describing something terrible. And it's all building upon those early empires. It's all coming to an apex where the Roman Empire will have some sort of control again. A reemergence. We looked at some theories of the 10 different resurrections of that Roman Empire. If you remember, I had the slide that showed 9 of them. Whether or not that's 100% accurate, and we've gotten through 9, I don't know. It's just an idea that we're maybe waiting on one more. But it always goes back to we have to have that relationship with God. Now, I don't care if we've had 9.5 of the 10 resurrections or 1 of the resurrections. We have to have a relationship with God. That's all that matters really for us. Because we may live our life And we may go through our life and we may die without any of this ever playing out. We just don't know where we are. And so we have to work through this as if we are going to live our life all the way through. Try to get educated, have a family, have a good job, whatever it is in your life that you want to do, live it. But make sure at the top of that list is having a relationship with God, understanding his words, understanding what God has, not just for us, but humanity. That's as exciting as the Feast of Tabernacles is. It's not about us. The Feast of Tabernacles isn't about us. It's about the rest of humanity. It's about the humanity that's alive, and then the 8th day is about the humanity that's never heard about Jesus Christ, never been given a chance to have a relationship with God. We have to do it now. We have to be solidified now. I want to wrap this up, but before I do, I want to read verses 7 through 10. So for next time, you may want to review your notes for Daniel 2 and 7, just to remember what all we went through. And I want to read you this because this is where we're getting into in the next sermon. We're going to see about that other horn, that little one, the one that speaks pompous words against God, this religious affiliation that ties to this political power. This is Revelation 13 and verse 7. It says, "It was granted to him to make war with the saints, to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." We're told to be patient. We're told to be faithful. Stick with it. We're going to get into this section because this is talking about us now again. It's talking about persecuting the saints. This has direct impact on us. We don't know by living in the United States if we'll be buffered from everything else that happens. Don't know. But I can tell you 100% that it says the saints are going to be persecuted. I know every single one of us pray that we're taken into the place of safety, right? We're taken to the wilderness and protected, but it's not a guarantee. We know there's those who are tried by fire, and we know there's those who are martyred. Be good, but not too good. That's my joke to everybody. I try to do enough to get into the place of safety, but not enough that God knows I'll stick with it and send me out to be martyred. That's why it's a joke, because we should all try to be the martyr. But nobody wants to be martyred. But we know it's coming. We know it's going to happen. We have to be prepared. You have to ask yourself, are you prepared? Are you prepared for anything? Because as the chaos ensues, as the turmoil ensues, things are going to get crazy. And we've seen firsthand over the last 3 years what happens. What happens when normalcy is disrupted? What happens when our normal daily lives are flipped upside down? It gets chaotic. It gets chaotic, and we lose some sense of order at times. We lose some sense of focus. We forget what's valuable and what's important. And so that's what we're going to get into. We're going to go through the rest of those sections there in Revelation 13 and really hit on this religious power that is associated with that. We're going to talk about this persecution that we're going to see.
Thank you, Mr. Creech. If you'd all please rise. Our last hymn today will be hymn 167, God Will See Us Through, after which we'll have the closing prayer and the blessing on the food by Mr. Andy McLean.